highlight what that was real quick?
Yes, I will. There might be someone else that would like to also highlight it. Nobody's making eye contact with me. So what we did was, the Living Coast, basically, they kind of gave us a history of, now they're the Living Coast because the word Chula Vista was very limiting. They talked about they're a nonprofit now, but they still do, partly are owned by the city, their land and everything. But what the Living Coast is for, is to study wetlands. It's an estuary, and it's basically, they want to build awareness of the natural surroundings and the natural habitats here in this area and in the watershed. And so what they had us do was, we built a model, as you can see there. We built a model of a watershed, and we talked about how a watershed, how it works, and then how it ends up in the wetland, in an estuarine system. And so we talked about that. We also looked at biomimicry. We talked about how Velcro was made. We talked about different types of natural, like they're little burrs, that stick to animals, and that's how the seeds are moved around. And Velcro. We talked about shark skin suits that some of the swimmers used to wear in the Olympics, was made from shark skin with the little tiny scales. So we talked about some of these adaptations. Then we walked around and we looked at the birds. They have a lot of birds there that have been recovered from being injured. We watched an eagle get fed. Kind of gruesome. It was a rat. So his name was Franklin, because Ben Franklin, you guys know the story. Ben Franklin wanted the turkey to actually be our. Can you imagine the beautiful eagle was a turkey? So luckily they didn't listen to Ben Franklin, and we have an eagle instead of a turkey as our symbol. So Franklin ate a rat, and he was running around. To see an eagle run on the ground was kind of interesting. I'll post that video on my Twitter feed. So we saw the eagles, we saw some of the different birds of prey, the raptors that were there being rehabilitated, but some of them, of course, cannot go back into the wild because they're imprinted. And so we did that. We walked around. There's a giant picture of all of us there in front of the eagle enclosure. So we had a very nice day. We got to see some local animals, and we got to talk about the local vegetation, and it was a lovely day, and it's a great place. And they talked about some field trips that you can take, and I'm getting saved. Thank you, Gina.
I just wanted to say, I don't know how many of you have been going to the Living Coast. I've been doing this for years, and I've always loved it. But a lot of the activities were really geared towards like elementary and middle school, and so they've actually gone through a transformation in their curriculum. So what's great is I'm looking forward to this year doing an activity, because we've kind of done things independently. Also, I take my students over there and we do species assessment and water testing. And if you want to borrow, I have plankton nets. I have stuff for sediment core to look at megafauna. I have all kinds of different things for water testing labs, and you're welcome to borrow them. It's good that they get used. But that could be, and we also take the Vernier probes down there, and we do some good water testing labs. And so that's an option too. You can do one of the, I forget how long it is, if it's an hour or 2 hours. And then you can go out in the field and do the walk, and then we do a lower, middle, and upper estuary assessment.
Yeah, it was nice. I went with Gina a couple of years ago, and we got some great samples, and we took them back to her classroom and did some analysis. So it's a really nice place to go, and it talks. Some of the students have never been there, and it's right in your backyard. So it's a nice place to check out, even with your own family. Take your kids and go and enjoy. Okay, anybody else have anything to add? Okay.
Well, thank you. So here is what we're going to do. I was going to talk about a few more things, but I think it's important for everybody to kind of walk around. So I'm going to go straight into the icebreaker activity. So I'm going to ask Dr. Odesma to come right up here, and she's going to lead you on something.
Morning. Thank you again for having me join you. I'm always excited to be here with the Sweetwater teachers. You all are very inspirational to me. So thank you again for allowing me to be here with you. So I don't want to continue engineering fatigue, so I'm going to bring some structure to this particular engineering activity. So I want us to look at engineering decision making, how you can go about selecting a solution. And I think this is a really good tool to add on to our experiences the last time I was here, when we were looking at that disciplined approach to how we tackle problems by looking at that engineering design process. And now we want to look at some specific tools, or a specific tool that we can use within that design process, particularly as it relates to how we can make decisions once we've come up with all those great creative ideas. So just to show that I'm so structured, I'm going to tell you what my objectives are. So I want us to be able to describe key features of criteria. So we want to get some new vocabulary or reinforce vocabulary that you may already be familiar with. And what their role is in making evidence-based decisions when choosing from among alternative solutions. Really want to emphasize on that evidence-based solutions, decision-making. I want to be able to distinguish between criteria and constraints. And then I'm going to focus on a specific tool called the weighted benefit analysis method that we can use to help decide between various alternatives. All right, just to show that this is not kind of just a cool activity, but it actually relates to the standards. Here, this technique falls in line in terms of the practices, where engineers need to be able to analyze the data they collected in their test of their design, so on and such forth, that allows them to compare different solutions and determine how well each one meets specific design criteria. So it's right in line with that particular goal. Or even if we look at the core ideas from the engineering and technology core ideas, how can various proposed design solutions be compared and then possibly even improved? So we're really trying to focus in on meeting these two parts of the standard. Okay, so engineers follow a very systematic, evidence-based process for making decisions. And there are multiple ways in which this can be done. Some examples of that could be using something called a pairwise comparison, quality function deployment, or QFDs. You might have heard that too. And today I'm going to really focus on one aspect of, or one tool here, which is this weighted benefit analysis. All right, so let's just kind of start with this concept of a criteria. So if the goal here was to determine what was the best place to eat in town, you kind of have to ask, well, what are you trying to do? Is it that you're trying to host a party for some, 20-year-olds, or you want to look to eat something between classes? So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, depending on what problem we're trying to solve, the criteria will be different. Even if it's something as simple as, I want to eat and you want to eat, but if we are having different goals in terms of that eating, our criteria will be different. So in engineering design, criteria are what we say are required or desired standards or attributes of our solution. So some characteristics of criteria. It should be clear. So we should be able to identify which one is better. So for instance, if it has to do with the temperature of a room, we don't want to just say a good temperature. We want to be very specific about maybe what range of temperature we are actually looking for. Ultimately, it should allow us to be able to distinguish between multiple options. So you wouldn't just say, I'm only going to buy a car if it has a side mirror, because, really, all cars should have side mirrors. And they really should be measurable, although there are times when we are looking at more subjective type of criteria, but you don't want these subjective criteria to be the bulk of your criteria. So most of your criteria, you really want it so that you can find an objective way to measure them. So we have kind of two types of criteria, and as a result, we almost call one a slightly different term. So your must criteria, so we say that's attributes that anything that is deemed successful must have that particular criteria. So we might use the term constraints to describe those, or we can also call them sort of the go or no-go. So if it doesn't meet that, it's a no-go. If it does, well, we continue to explore and evaluate it further. Then you have your should criteria. So the most of them probably will fall into that, because that really allows us to compare different options. And these attributes help us, as I said, to determine whether we can, to distinguish between one option versus another one. All right, so I'm going to just go through an example and then I'm going to actually get us working on something. So let's say we wanted to determine what was the best material for creating models of puzzle pieces. So I'm going to go through some options that we can consider. So we can look at modeling clay, and you can see some of the characteristics of that. We could use caramel cubes. That'll be pretty sweet. We could use dice. Centimeter cubes. Foam blocks. And last but not least, sugar cubes. All right, so based on some of the characteristics of those various options, what would be some criteria that we could consider for deciding which ones we might want to use? Yes?
Who's going to use this puzzle?
Okay, so who's going to use it? That certainly will play a factor into it.
Cost.
Okay, cost. So users, cost, stability,
Like longevity, reusability.
longevity, reusability. Any others? All right, so how messy it might be, the cleanup, how friendly it is to ants, yeah? All right, so we said some of these costs, reusability was mentioned, the cleanliness, the resilience of it. We could add things like connections, testability. This is just some of the possible criteria we could look at. And I just also want to just kind of bring us to think about, in general, some types of criteria that you would find in engineering projects. Could be functions. We could look at product lifespan, development of time, size, material cost, and so on. And I do want to emphasize definitely thinking about who the user is also one that should also be noted here. All right, so when we look at this benefit analysis, weighted benefit analysis process, there are sort of two main things we want to do. So once you've identified your criteria, then you want to, I would even say first, come up with a weighting, because all of the criteria aren't necessarily equally as important. So you want to come up with some weighting that identifies or ranks the importance of your various criteria. And one option is that we could use a number between 1 and 10, where of course 10 is the most important and 1 would be a least important criteria. Then for each criterion that you identified, you want to come up with a way to translate a 1 to 5 scoring scale to something that relates to that criterion. So, I mean, here it's just talking about barely acceptable all the way to ideal, but the more quantifiable you are, the better it is in terms of how you rank and rate each of those criteria. And then in terms of how we set it up, so it's a simple table where criteria is in that first column. So we list all our criteria, followed by the weight, so how important each of those criterion is. Then all our options are at the top row. And then here we begin to put that rating using our 1 to 5 scale for each of your options. So in this case, in terms of cost, I gave modeling clay a 2, caramel cubes got a 3, the dice got 1, and this is here where we're going, 1 would be the most expensive, and 5 would sort of be the least expensive. So I'm kind of rating it where my higher ranking relates to my more desired attribute of that criterion. Then I want to multiply each of my values by my weights, and then find the sum of all of those products to come up with a total score. And the way it's set up here, then ultimately your higher score is your more desirable option. So if I were to do this completely using the criterion or the criteria that I identified, from cost, reusability, all the way to testability, I have my weights. So for me, reusability and model resilience were the key options. Then uniform geometry and not needing cleanup was my other one. And then you could see the others in terms of how I ranked them in terms of importance. And then I rate each of my options, and then I come up with this total score. And then you can see here that my interlocking cubes came out highest, which means in a way this was my preferred option. So kind of using this structure, this allowed me now to make some decisions among those various design options that I had. All right, so let's practice now. So first of all, has anybody ever done an experiment like this with their students? So in a way, it could be really relevant to a subject or topic that you might be doing. And for those who've done it, how have you gone about deciding which design that your students came up with was best?
We looked at the amount of oil that was left over, the residue oil in the water.
So just one thing you looked at?
It was that and then time.
And time, how long it took? Okay. All right, so what was the problem that the students in this class were asked to solve? Okay, so they were asked to clean up the oil spill. Now, in your case, you're being asked something. So who's asking you to do something now? Right. So the teacher is now your client. And what is he asking your team to do specifically? Okay, so he wants you to come up with a mechanism or a method to help him evaluate among the various options. Very similar again to that engineering concept. We could look at each team sort of proposing a possible solution, and now we want to determine which of these solutions is the best solution. And so what would you need to include if you were delivering this back to the teacher here? Right. So he wants to see your rankings and your rationale, because you can imagine he has to let his students know why, in fact, Team A was chosen over Team B. So I'm going to have you work in probably teams of 2 or 3, and I'm going to give you the data that corresponds with what his students produce. And then I want us to, in your teams, to again go through this process of identifying what you think the key criteria should be. 1.2. Oh, fine. Then you decide on the weighting. So decide on which one of these things you think should be most important. So again, refer to that letter in terms of how he framed this problem for his students. Then for each criterion, you want to define what the meaning of that 1 to 5 score is. And I really want to push you here to begin to put more objective measures on those criterion. So if you're looking at how much of the oil spill was cleared, you might actually want to say if it's percentage between this and this, that's a 5. Or between this and this is a 4. This and this is a 1. And so you kind of come up with what you are using to scale each one. And then you want to go ahead and construct this benefit analysis table, complete that evaluation, and then let us know what your conclusions are. So let me just ask, do you all have, yes, I was just going to suggest that. So do you have access to the Google Drive? No, I was just saying that I already had a spreadsheet from my example, so you could use that and tailor it, so that you're not starting from scratch. But then you don't have to use Excel, but certainly this would be an opportunity if you were doing something like this in your class to also introduce your students to Excel, because it's a phenomenal tool. It is used very widely in industry, so it's really just kind of helping them hone in those skills. Okay, so I saw I think there was a lot of commonality, and then there were some differences from team to team. So can I just get us to debrief here? Okay, so some things I just want to clarify. Right, so some things I want to clarify. The weighting. So we said the weightings were used just to help you identify which ones were more important. And we said, use a scale from 1 to 10, where 10 in this case would be the most important. If you do it the other way, where you make 1 the most important, it just means when you evaluate the totals, you probably will be looking for the one that's the least score versus the one with the highest score. Does that make sense? So it doesn't have to be 1 to 10. You could have said 1 to 5 or something. Then, for each criterion, again, it doesn't have to be a 1 to 5 scale. You could have done it in percentages, which would have made it a 1 to 100 scale. But the goal here is you want to make the same scale be used for all the criteria. If you don't use the same scale for all the criteria, you're automatically going to be putting a weighting on them without even sort of being cognizant of that. So I just always consistently use a 1 to 5 scale, but what that 1 to 5 scale means differs from criterion to criterion. And in general, because I want it so that my best option has the highest score, when I use that 1 to 5 rating, that the score of 5 goes to my best value in that criterion. So in this case, where, for instance, cost is not, the high cost is not desirable, then the cost that is lowest will actually get a score of 5, and the cost that is highest can actually get a score of 1. Right. Now I just want to show one tool, because it was unfamiliar to me until I did it recently with my students, and it may be to you as well. But if you use Excel and you set up your table, so you have your criteria and your weights and then the individual scores, what you can do is use a function known as sum product. And sum product, what it does is it multiplies, so it takes basically 2 arrays and it multiplies sort of by element. So in this case, it would automatically say 5 multiplied by 2 plus 10 multiplied by 2 plus 8 multiplied by 1. But you do that in just one function. And so the function says sum product, and then I highlight the data in the first column, and I highlight the data in the second column, and then it calculates the same exact thing. And then I do that for each respective column. So you might just want to look up that sum product function, because it just makes you do this in one step rather than doing the multiplication and then doing the addition separately. Alright, so I hope this was useful. All the materials, because I think this is something you could actually do with your own students. And so all the information is here. There was a second part where if the criteria changed, and then you could see how the analysis would change, just to kind of focus on that point that depending on the problem, the criteria will change. So it's not sort of a standard criterion for every problem. And then based on your criteria, if that changes, you will have a different outcome as which is best.
So I just have a comment. I just did this with my Project Lead the Way students before fall break. And I have one kid who I call Rue, because he would be happiest if I strapped him to a baby Bjorn and carried him around all day. He's one of those. And he gets really upset when the group does not select his idea. He really is not a team player. So we actually did this before, set up their criteria before they actually did their design solution, and it completely shut him down because, in a good way, because his design on the criteria that he agreed to wasn't the best design. And so it's really good for those kids who have a hard time accepting other people's ideas, because, it is what it is, right? It's the criteria we agreed to, so.
And it emphasizes it's data driven.
Right.
So it's not about what I like and what you like. It's very data and very analytical in how we decide which is actually the best.
All right, well, with that, thank you.
Kids through college.
Yep.
Well, the saran wrap.
Let's get a little video going.
So the saran wrap on the top is so that the
I went to the Smithsonian over break.
water can
Two cool things. One, Joseph Priestley's flask is in there. And Breaking Bad, like the whole outfit.
That's
for Breaking
hilarious.
Bad. Yeah, that was a science I saw.
I bought them at Smart Farmers,
And
it was kind of expensive because I couldn't buy.
Now, are we supposed to be gallery walking everybody else?
Right now? I thought not till 11.
Okay.
Oh wait, yeah, 10:30 I think.
Oh
my
goodness. Gallery
So
walking
water-
everybody
so
else
what are we
too?
saying?
Yeah, we feel like it.
I think we kind of are supposed to, but no one's come back.
Come here. It's true.
Chloride.
Okay.
Now, if you do this with distilled water, you shouldn't see any of that.
Yeah.
Chlorine in the water. That's another test to verify that your distillate is pure.
Okay, so at the end here,
It's like the ghosts in Poltergeist coming down the steps.
So we're going to need them to do, so then they're going to build your device. Plan, build, and then
So then are we going to end up with this blue moss at the bottom of that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't want to run We're dry. gonna have them do
Yeah.
So you're going to stop short of that. Testing on the initial water and then testing on the final temperature. Right? So
But it should get darker.
salt
in
water.
color.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of cool to
Test
start with
your
light blue
initial water.
and watch it.
That's true.
Decrease as we go down.
And we just do. Okay.
so you demonstrate this,
We do
you
water.
demonstrate it still, and then you show the
It
kids
really
and
depends on what you do.
So we've got a single displacement reaction.
Exactly.
There you go.
No, double,
You guys are
double.
making your student
Double.
handout?
Silver nitrate.
Yeah, I think so. Doing a lower cup.
Yeah, we're doing it. We could have a model up here and it would show that
Right.
the kids would come up with different
I just don't know what the collecting trough would look like. I saw another one that uses a big bottle, like a big empty water bottle, like a 1 gallon crystal geyser one, and then at the top they cut holes with straws, and the straws fit into smaller bottles. As it evaporated up, it went into the straws and collected.
Super cool. I wonder if we can have them modify this. Yeah, like here's how people do it, simple. We'll take the ideas and build on it and make a better one.
Great. Because I was looking online at different, and I liked the bottle idea with it evaporating. But now I don't know how efficient it would be.
But it's so cool. See, I was also thinking like with this. The whole thing is like not
You just fill this,
instead of having to try to wind up back in that cup, you fill this cup with water and then just let it evaporate what happens down the sides.
How many days do you think it's going to take?
Water here. That would be what the kids could figure
How
out.
many days do you think we're going to need to let it outside? What's that? How many days do you think we're going to sit outside? 2 days?
Let me see how many
4
days
days?
little girls like it. Well, and then wouldn't that be part of the reason why we have? We do it on Monday.
Is it 509?
Oh, you're right. So just go to the middle room.
It's all 500.
It's part of our phenomenon and just like something about different.
We also did the practice. Right, yeah. Show lesson five.
Also does that right.
So we have the whole lesson here.
Great. Okay, that's good. So, okay, that makes sense. Sometimes in the freezer, I don't know exactly, but not. Yeah, I can't.
I did it like 2 seconds.
It's contaminated.
I'll figure it out. No, I'll figure it.
Because if it's even slightly wet, it could be breaking that, couldn't it? You need it completely dry. You're on camera, Ryan.
You should stretch the data.
Yeah. I didn't even know you could click on this. Okay. Yep. There you go.
So like, let's say we know that this is bad data right here.
Oh, it only deletes that.
And
certain
so
point.
once those, it wants.
Oh.
So if I say I want to go all the way to here, and that's just
Oh,
bad
I
data, I can say, well, let's get rid of that. And why did it reset?
What about, can you just do the whole thing? How do you?
But if I go to delete, it wants to delete a saved file. So, if leader or whatever data.
I need a copy of it. Can I put it on?
Yeah. Anytime you want to set something to Notability, you just click this plus.
Yeah, I did.
And then you say,
so select graph.
More.
Actually, I don't even think
I don't know
we
why
select graph.
Notability sounds
Let me try it on
better.
the other one. No, just click on any data point.
It might
And
have something to
while
do
holding-
with your settings and Notability.
But holding down on the screen, drag across the entire length of graph. That's probably the easiest way to say it.
See,
And
mine
then select
has open
graph
in.
drop down menu at the top of the
And I can
page
just open it in Notability right away.
and strike through data.
What if you give it
Do you have an open in at the top? Does it have Notability? There we
Open
go.
in,
You can export it to Notability.
Yeah. Okay.
So now if I go to run 3 is empty.
So select any point.
Looks like there's something over here, doesn't there?
That's kind of weird. Maybe choose a different run and then choose run 3 again. No. Is that a point?
Let me select it. Oh, there you go. Okay. It was more sensitive because usually I had to like.
Yeah.
All right, and go. Yep.
That was better.
And you could even, I mean, if we get really fancy, I could delete some of this excess 0 data.
So that you don't need to.
So you could do this and make the graph.
What did it submit?
Scoot it over. I guess I'd have to reset.
You shouldn't. You can't just clip it.
Well, that's what I just tried to do.
There's got to be a way to do
Can you
that.
undo?
Figuring this thing out.
Maybe I'll graph just what you have, though.
So you can see the temperature is going down.
Just use a
So
ruler
they
or
should come
something.
together
Hot water
to
is losing its,
And,
heat, and the cold water is picking up. Eventually, they'll get
somebody
these,
started.
people would-
Right.
these bumps right here are caused by leaking this stuff.
Yeah, I figured.
Nice,
you
that's
get the
cool.
change in velocity and
And
the.
then here we have,
So
these
works.
are,
Yep.
We should
And I
hook
know
up
she
the other
said she's
touch.
printing.
touch that one.
Yeah,
And
we,
then you can,
Okay, and
then
then that's
Right now,
this one.
only one of
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. And so now the question is, I've got two chunks of ice here.
Just do this one. So
Well, which of these is
you
the ice
can
going to melt
have
faster?
another
No.
motion detector at this end. So you have
But that one's warmer.
yeah, but we're chemistry.
Yeah, they would not say that actually.
Yeah.
The
That
kids,
is-
are going to, let me get some paper towels.
Oh yeah, cool. That is actually very cool.
Okay, and so, although this is the colder one that feels colder, the ice melts a lot
Just went to the Disney website.
because of the
I have
thermal
an email me a link.
conductivity.
Oh, okay. Did you
Okay,
contact
this guy right here is like, really?
I called him, but you can email him.
It's actually a very good insulator.
Very good. What is the material?
It's either wood or plastic.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think it's wood. It's wood.
There's another one, but no, that one
This
works.
is what, like,
That's
aluminum?
That's aluminum.
That is awesome.
No.
So this is a great demonstration.
That's a great
And
one.
the idea is, we actually don't do a demonstration. You have one of these for each lab station,
Oh, okay.
and you say, okay, so here's what you got to do. And you give them the steps, and they've got to write down what their prediction is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's going to melt faster from this because it's warmer. Right. Okay, so now you put your ice on.
So this is a great
Okay, now explain this, please.
Yeah.
And now they got to put their thinking caps on.
Oh yeah.
And hopefully we've done a little discussion beforehand. So, yeah.
And then they can get.
This is good too in chemistry, right? For our metals or non-metals. Nice. The wooden spoon in boiling water, the metal spoon. Nice.
And they can find soaps.
So nifty.
This little button.
I like this one too. I haven't done this.
Yeah. So we actually
So if you highlight
made this with a 3D printer.
Did you really? So you did at your school?
No.
I carried that.
I didn't do it. One of the other teachers.
Oh, okay.
So
she made that in the.
She made this with a 3D printer.
Isn't this cool?
Yeah.
I love this one.
That's the wood and metal.
Yeah.
And we need to get a. What we've discovered is we need a better heat bridge because we just got some copper wire and put it. We need a lot more. The more
you could actually
heat
just
bridge
twist
you've
a
got,
bunch. You know, we could just twist a bunch.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's really easy.
Yeah, the more you've got, the faster.
We could also use
transfer. So we need to get this like.
Where's the other one that was already open?
You've got to get it engineered for a lab.
Where's the other one?
Want to get it done inside a period.
Yeah.
How big are the pieces?
In terms of length.
So.
Did you show them the ice cube?
Yeah. All right, go.
Okay, so you want to introduce the students to the concept of half-life. So you take 100 M&Ms and you put them in a tray, turn all the M's up, so now they're one element. This is element M. And now you're going to shake it up, and now you pull out all of the M&Ms that flipped over and don't show anything. Because on one side, you've got an M, so that's element M. And on the other side, there's this is element not M. So now I've got a radioactive decay product, and I take all those out, and I'm going to make a chart. And there's actually kind of a neat picture from another lab right here. You do the same thing using pennies. So this is one with pennies. You take them out and lay them down, and you get a distribution that looks like this. So your first trial, and you should have, out of the 100, you should have around 50. It may not be exact. It could be 49, could be 50. And then the next time you've got around 25. And the next time around 12 or 13. And so you have this half-life decay process, and the students get to experience, and then they get to eat the results.
Love this one. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
That's still like, get an understanding or incorporating how the brain damage.
Yeah, no, and I like how the labeling the egg as to, I mean. Right. No, that's a great. Well, I actually teach anatomy, and so that's what I'm even thinking. Like, that's a great little review of the anatomy, actual anatomical parts and stuff, and then they get in here. Now we're trying to actually solve this problem.
I did not know there was such a thing as but you know, there's things that are so that's one of the labs.
It really works. You can turn me when you're slide piping your olive oil for there.
Yeah, that's
I don't know if there's a connection.
You could do the muscle like a tube. No.
If I only fills out as I go to different than stuff that today, but yeah, that's what you already thought of. I'm into it.
Absolutely. I mean, but they're also graphic.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Cumulative water.
Display. Do they have it?
And then temperature.
No,
And then there'll be another one.
see how
It's really hard to tell. So
Is there,
most of these
because that visual thing,
so like how good
it's so much better than data tables, like they're able to put the data into something visual. And they can put that all on one graph. I mean, you can graph height, temperature, humidity in the water, and what else?
I'm highly looking at never seen this before. I'm not sure what this root is.
Right. You could grab human fertilizer on there.
Are they keep adding?
Yep. Like remember, you can add, like you can put it in every water if you dilute it. That might be outside.
And these look like they're different types of cauliflower, but they're different colors.
Like my orchids
These
and
are
all
they
the
natural or
green.
have they been dyed?
They have not been dyed.
I feel like they look like they've been dyed. Wow. Okay.
They absorb nutrients.
You know what? This is.
It could be added later.
It's not.
And do we want to add?
I just started staking like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so you're right on most of this. So these are Asian pears. They're actual pears, but they do like these are actually new.
But for their presentation,
This time? That's awesome.
I have my window open.
Look, I wanted to see.
That's real life.